The distant howl of a wolf pierced the night as Rachel Lawson stared out at the vast Arizona territory from her bedroom window, the lantern light flickering behind her. It was 1878, and Kingman was still little more than a dusty outpost clinging to the newly laid Atlantic and Pacific Railroad tracks. 3 years had passed since she'd fled this place, running from broken promises and a heart shattered beyond recognition. Now she was back, though she'd sworn never to return. The letter had found her in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. Just 4 lines in a shaky hand. Kent is dying, shot by rustlers. Asking for you, come if you can. It was signed by Doc Miller, the only physician for 50 miles. No elaboration needed the man who had once promised to love her until his dying breath was now facing that very moment, and somehow, despite everything, he wanted her. Rachel pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as dawn broke over the mountains. The stagecoach journey had been brutal, 4 days of dust, heat, and memories she'd tried desperately to bury. Her fashionable city clothes, once a symbol of her new life, now seemed like ridiculous costumes compared to the simple cotton dresses she'd worn in her previous life here. Miss Rachel. A gentle knock at her door drew her attention. The doctor sent word. Said you'd want to know Mr. Matheson's still hanging on. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. Rachel smoothed her skirts, gathering her courage. The boarding house keeper had welcomed her back without question, though Rachel had seen the curiosity in her eyes. Everyone would be wondering why she'd returned for the man who had jilted her so publicly. The morning air was already warm as Rachel made her way down Beale Street toward Doc Miller's office at the end of town. Kingman was waking up storekeepers sweeping porches, the blacksmith stoking his forge, cowboys stumbling bleary-eyed from the saloon after a night of cards. A few nodded in recognition, most just stared. The prodigal daughter returned at last. Doc Miller's weathered face appeared haggard when he opened the door. You came. He ushered her inside, the medicinal smells of carbolic acid and herbs hanging heavy in the air. Wasn't sure you would, neither was I. Rachel removed her bonnet, her hands trembling slightly. How is he, bad? Bullet tore through his side, missed his heart, but caused massive bleeding. Infection set in. Doc Miller rubbed his gray beard. Been calling your name in his fever. When I told him I'd written to you, he seemed to rally somewhat. Rachel nodded, steeling herself. I'd like to see him now. Through there. Doc gestured toward a door at the back of his office. I'll give you privacy. The small room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning sun. Kent Matheson lay motionless on the bed, his once powerful frame diminished beneath the blankets. His face, sun-bronzed and handsome in her memories, appeared hollow, his cheeks flushed with fever. The sight of him, both familiar and shockingly altered, made Rachel's breath catch. She approached slowly, settling into the chair beside him. For a moment, she simply watched the shallow rise and fall of his chest, wondering what madness had compelled her to travel hundreds of miles to sit at the bedside of the man who had destroyed her dreams. I should hate you, she whispered, reaching out tentatively to touch his hand. It felt hot, the skin dry. I tried to. For 3 years I tried to hate you. Kent didn't stir. The only sounds were his labored breathing and the ticking of a clock on the wall. Rachel closed her eyes, memories flooding back unbidden. Their first meeting at the spring dance. His shy smile as he asked her to ride with him along the creek. The way his eyes had crinkled at the corners when he laughed. The night he'd proposed beneath a sky ablaze with stars, promising her forever. Then came the bitter memories, the rumors about the young widow on the neighboring ranch. Kent's increasingly frequent absences. The day she'd found them together, his stammered explanations that made everything worse. The wedding postponed, then canceled entirely. The whispers and pitying glances that followed her everywhere until she couldn't bear it anymore and fled to California. Why did you ask for me? She murmured, opening her eyes to study his face. What more could you possibly have to say? As if in answer, Kent's eyelids fluttered, though they didn't open. His fingers twitched beneath hers, and she found herself instinctively tightening her grip. Kent. She called softly. He didn't respond. Rachel sighed, settling back in the chair. She would wait. She'd come too far not to hear whatever he wanted to tell her, even if it was just to seek forgiveness before meeting his maker. Hours passed. Doc Miller came and went, changing bandages and coaxing water between Kent's parched lips. Rachel refused offers to rest, remaining steadfast at his side. As evening approached, she found herself doing something she hadn't done in years: praying. She wasn't sure when she slipped to her knees beside the bed, her hands clasped around his larger one, her forehead pressed against the mattress. The words came haltingly at first, then in a desperate, fervent stream. "Please, Lord," she whispered, "I don't understand why I'm here. I don't know what purpose this serves, but I'm asking, please don't take him yet. Give him a chance to wake. Let him speak whatever words he needs to say." A slight pressure on her hand interrupted her prayer. She looked up to find Kent's eyes open, those same hazel eyes that had once looked at her with such love, now clouded with pain but unmistakably aware. His cracked lips parted. "You came back," he whispered, the words barely audible. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. "Yes," she said simply. "Doc Miller wrote to me." Kent's eyes closed briefly, a tear escaping from the corner. "Never thought you would." "I almost didn't," she admitted, rising to sit on the edge of the chair. "Why did you ask for me, Kent?" His breathing quickened, each word an obvious struggle. "Need to tell you." "Truth. Before you're not dying," Rachel interrupted firmly, surprising herself. "Not if I have anything to say about it." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Still stubborn. "Rest now," she said, reaching for the water glass on the nightstand. "We can talk when you're stronger." Kent shook his head weakly. "No time, guaranteed." He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Listen, please," Rachel nodded, helping him sip some water first. "I'm listening. What happened with Sarah Willis?" He named the widow Rachel had found him with. "Not what you think." Her husband owed money to dangerous men. They were coming to collect from her. Rachel frowned. "What does that have to do with? I was helping her sell the ranch secretly, getting her and the children away before those men came." Kent paused, gathering strength. "The day you found us." "She was crying because I'd just given her the money. She was leaving that night. You expect me to believe you were just being neighborly?" Rachel's voice carried the echo of old pain. Kent's eyes held her steadily. "I swore to her husband, before he died, that I'd protect them." "Then why didn't you tell me this 3 years ago? Why let me believe you'd betrayed me?" His face contorted with what might have been shame. "Those men had connections everywhere, feared they'd hurt you if they knew you had knowledge of her whereabouts." He coughed, a rattling sound that terrified Rachel. "Let you hate me, kept you safe." Rachel sat back, stunned. It seemed impossible, yet something in his eyes, the same honest gaze that had won her heart years before, made her hesitate. "Kent, who shot you?" "Same men," he whispered. "Finally." "Found out it was me who hid their money." The pieces began falling into place. His insistence that she leave town after their broken engagement, the mysterious cash gift that had appeared in her trunk just before her departure, enough to start a new life in San Francisco. "You arranged for that money," she realized aloud. "You wanted me gone from Kingman." Kent nodded slightly. "Far away from danger." "Oh, Kent." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You let me hate you for 3 years to protect me. Easier that way." His voice was fading. "Needed you to know. Before I go, always loved you, Rachel. Only you. Don't you dare," she said fiercely, gripping his hand. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me, Kent Matheson. Not when I just found out the truth." His eyes drifted closed again, strength spent. Rachel turned to find Doc Miller standing in the doorway, watching them with a troubled expression. "How much of that did you hear?" she asked. "Enough," he replied. "I always wondered why a decent man like Kent would do what everyone thought he did. This explains a lot. Will he live?" The question burned in her throat. Doc Miller approached the bed, checking Kent's pulse. "The fever's the real concern now, if we can break it." He shrugged. "He's strong, and now he has something to fight for." Rachel squared her shoulders. "Tell me what to do." The next 3 days blurred together in a ceaseless rhythm of cooling compresses, spoonfuls of broth, and whispered encouragement. Rachel barely left Kent's side, sleeping in short snatches in the chair when exhaustion overtook her. The fever raged, then broke, then returned with frightening intensity. On the 4th night, as a thunderstorm raged outside, Kent's condition deteriorated rapidly. His breathing became shallow and labored, his skin burning to the touch despite the cool cloths Rachel continually applied. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her voice hoarse from hours of talking to him. She'd been telling him stories of her life in San Francisco, of the bookshop where she worked, of the ocean and the foghorns and all the things she'd seen. Now words failed her and she simply held his hand, tears streaming unchecked down her face. In desperation, she slid from the chair to her knees, pressing his hand to her cheek. "Please, God," she prayed aloud, "don't take him now. Not when we've lost so much time already. Please give him back to me." The storm outside reached its peak, lightning illuminating the room in brief, stark flashes. Rain lashed against the windows as Rachel continued her vigil, praying with an intensity that surprised even her. Somewhere in the small hours of the morning, as the storm began to abate, she drifted into an exhausted sleep, still kneeling beside the bed, her head resting on the mattress near Kent's hand. She awoke to the gentle touch of fingers stroking her hair. Rachel lifted her head, blinking in the gray pre-dawn light. Kent was looking at her, his eyes clear for the first time in days, the flush of fever gone from his face. "You're still here," he murmured, voice weak but steady. "Of course I am." She reached up to touch his forehead. It was cool and slightly damp. The fever had broken, Kent's lips curved into a faint smile. "Heard you praying," Rachel flushed, suddenly self-conscious. "I wasn't sure you could hear anything, heard everything." His eyes were intent on her face. Stories about San Francisco, the bookshop. "Your landlady's cat," he paused, swallowing with effort. "Your voice. It was the rope pulling me back." Doc Miller's examination confirmed what Rachel already knew: the crisis had passed. The fever was gone, and though Kent was terribly weak, the wound was finally showing signs of healing. "It's not short of a miracle," Doc admitted, packing away his stethoscope. "I've seen stronger men succumb to less." "It wasn't my time," Kent said simply, his eyes finding Rachel's across the room. As Kent slowly regained his strength over the following weeks, Rachel established a routine. Mornings at his bedside, reading from the newspaper or books she borrowed from the town's small library. Afternoons helping Doc Miller with his other patients, discovering an aptitude for nursing she hadn't known she possessed. Evenings walking the short distance to her boarding house, only to return after breakfast the next day. They spoke little of the past at first, focusing instead on Kent's recovery. But as color returned to his face and he began to sit up for longer periods, the questions Rachel had been holding back could no longer be contained. "Sarah Willis," she began one quiet afternoon as she changed the dressing on his wound, which had healed to an angry red line across his ribs. "Where did she go?" Kent winced slightly as she applied the carbolic solution. "Oregon. Her sister lived there. Last I heard, she'd remarried. A shopkeeper, I think. And the men who were after her, after you," his expression darkened. "2 were arrested in Prescott last year. The leader, a man named Jasper Reeves, is still out there. He's the one who shot me." Rachel's hands stilled. "Will he come back to finish what he started?" "Not likely." Kent's voice held certainty. "Sheriff Burton sent telegrams all over the territory after I identified him. There's a sizable bounty now. He'd be a fool to show his face anywhere in Arizona." Rachel secured the bandage and sat back. "Why didn't you ever send word to me, after I was safely away, a letter explaining everything?" Kent looked down at his hands. "I started to, 100 times. But then I'd think about how you were building a new life, free from scandal and whispers." He met her gaze. "You deserved that chance. I had no right to complicate it with explanations that might draw you back into danger." "That wasn't your decision to make," Rachel said softly, the old hurt flaring briefly. "You should have trusted me with the truth." "You're right." He reached for her hand. "It was wrong. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just afraid." "Of what?" "That even knowing the truth, you might not forgive me, that the damage was already done." His fingers tightened around hers. "I couldn't bear to hear you reject me twice." Rachel was silent for a long moment. "I built a life in San Francisco," she finally said. "A good life. I have friends, work I enjoy." Kent nodded, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes betrayed his disappointment. "I understand. You'll be going back then." "I don't know." The admission surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. "I thought I knew what I wanted. Now I'm not so certain." The next day, Doc Miller declared Kent well enough to leave the clinic. "You'll need continued rest," he cautioned. No riding, no heavy lifting for at least another month, but you can recover at home now. Kent's ranch lay 10 miles outside town, a modest spread he'd built with his own hands after arriving in Arizona 5 years earlier. "I've got hands who will look after things," he told Rachel as they sat on Doc's porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. "But I'll need help for a while yet." Rachel understood the unspoken question. "I'll come out to the ranch," she said, "to make sure you don't overdo things." His relief was palpable. "I'd be grateful, Mrs. Parker raised an eyebrow, but made no comment when Rachel informed her she'd be leaving the boarding house temporarily to help care for Mr. Matheson during his convalescence. The older woman merely nodded and offered to store Rachel's trunk until she returned. "If I return," Rachel thought but didn't say. Kent's ranch house was just as she remembered, a solid 2-room cabin built of pine logs, with a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. The smaller room contained Kent's bed and a washstand. Simple, practical, and somehow more welcoming than any place she'd lived in San Francisco. "You can take the bed," Kent insisted as his foreman, Tom Wilkins, helped him down from the wagon that had brought them from town. "I'll sleep in the bunkhouse with the boys." Rachel shook her head firmly. "You need proper rest to heal. The sofa will be perfectly comfortable for me." Tom's wife, Ellie, had prepared the cabin for their arrival, stocking the pantry and leaving a pot of stew warming on the stove. After seeing Kent settled in a chair by the fireplace, Rachel thanked the Wilkinses and saw them off. "Alone at last," Kent said with a tired smile when she returned. The phrase hung between them, laden with memories of other times they'd spoken those words behind the church after Sunday services, in the shade of cottonwoods by the creek, stolen moments filled with kisses and promises. Rachel busied herself ladling stew into bowls. "You should eat, then rest." The following days established a new routine. Rachel cooked and cleaned, helped Kent with his exercises to regain strength in his injured side, and rode into town occasionally for supplies, and to send a letter to her employer in San Francisco, explaining her extended absence. Kent grew stronger by the day, soon able to walk the property and visit the barns and corrals, though Rachel watched him like a hawk to ensure he didn't overtax himself. They talked more freely now about the 3 years they'd spent apart, about the ranch and its prospects, about the changes coming to the Arizona territory as more settlers arrived by rail. But they carefully avoided speaking of the future, or of the feelings that still sparked between them whenever their hands accidentally touched or their eyes held for too long one evening. As they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset, Kent broke the unspoken rule. "I heard from my sister in Denver," he said casually. "She's expecting her 3rd child this winter." Rachel smiled. "That's wonderful. Give her my congratulations when you write back." "I will." He hesitated, then continued. "She asked about you, wondered if you might be staying." Rachel's hands stilled in her lap. "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know." Kent turned to face her fully. "That it wasn't my place to ask, but you're asking now." He nodded, his expression vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "I'm asking." Rachel looked out at the land spreading before them, the golden pastures, the distant mountains, the scattered pines casting long shadows in the fading light. 3 weeks had passed since they'd come to the ranch. In that time, she'd fallen back into the rhythms of this place as if she'd never left. More disturbingly, she'd begun to think of Kent's cabin as home in a way her San Francisco rooms had never felt. "I have responsibilities," she said slowly. "People expecting me back. I understand." Kent's voice was carefully even. "You've built a life there." "Yes." Rachel twisted her hands in her lap. "But it was always a life built on running away from here, from memories, from pain." She turned to meet his gaze. "What would I be running from if I left Kingman now?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I need time," she interrupted gently. "Time to be sure of what I want, of who I am now after everything." Kent nodded, reaching across the space between their chairs to take her hand. "I can give you time, Rachel. I've waited 3 years to have you back in my life. I can wait longer if that's what you need." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you." As September gave way to October, Kent's wound healed completely, leaving only a puckered scar to mark where the bullet had nearly ended his life. He resumed more of his normal duties around the ranch, though Rachel noticed he tired more quickly than before his injury. Rachel found herself increasingly involved in the operations of the ranch, helping Ellie Wilkins with the accounts, organizing supplies, even learning to ride again after years of city living. The familiar skills returned quickly, along with a sense of belonging she'd thought lost forever. Letters arrived from San Francisco, her landlady inquiring about her plans, the bookshop owner gently suggesting he would need to hire a replacement if she didn't return soon. Rachel answered carefully, making no promises either way. The turning point came on a crisp, late October morning. Rachel had ridden out alone to a hilltop overlooking the ranch, seeking clarity about the decision she knew she could no longer postpone. The valley spread below her, Kent's land merging with the wild territory beyond, beautiful and demanding and utterly unlike the ordered streets of San Francisco. The sound of hoofbeats alerted her to Kent's approach. He rode up beside her, dismounting stiffly, his side still troubled him in the cool mornings, and letting his horse graze nearby. "Thought I might find you here," he said, standing beside her. "You used to come to this spot when you needed thinking time. You remember that?" She smiled, touched by the observation. "I remember everything about you, Rachel." Kent's voice was soft, his gaze direct. "The way you twist your hair when you're reading. How you hum under your breath when you cook. The exact shade of blue your eyes turn when you're happy." Rachel's heart quickened. "Kent, let me finish," he said gently. "I know you've been wrestling with a decision about staying or going back to California. I promised I'd give you time, and I meant it." He took a deep breath. "But before you decide, I need you to know something." "What's that?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "I love you, still, always." The words were simple but filled with a certainty that took her breath away. "If you go back to San Francisco, I'll understand. But if there's any chance you might consider staying, building a life here with me, then I'm asking you, Rachel Lawson, to take that chance." Rachel looked out over the valley, then back at the man standing before her, the man she'd once promised to marry, the man she'd thought had betrayed her, the man who had let her believe a lie to keep her safe. "I loved the girl I was when I left here," she said slowly. "So determined to start over, to prove I didn't need Kingman or you." She met his gaze. "But I think I like the woman I've become since coming back even more. She's stronger, more certain of what matters." Hope bloomed in Kent's eyes. "And what matters, Rachel? This place." She gestured toward the valley. "This life, hard as it can be sometimes." Her voice softened. "And you, Kent Matheson, despite everything, or perhaps because of it, you matter most of all." Kent took a step closer, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. "Is that a yes, you'll stay?" Rachel nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "Yes, I'll stay." His answering smile was radiant as he drew her into his arms. The kiss they shared was gentle at first, then deepened with the release of years of separation and misunderstanding. When they finally parted, Rachel felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, a final healing of the wound she'd carried since their parting. "I should warn you," she murmured, her forehead resting against his. "I've gotten quite independent in San Francisco. I'm not the same girl who left here." Kent chuckled. "I wouldn't want you to be. I love the woman standing before me now, wiser, stronger, and considerably more stubborn than before. Stubborn enough to insist on certain changes around the ranch," she teased, though her eyes held a serious light. "If I'm to be the wife of a rancher, I intend to be a true partner." "Wife?" Kent pulled back slightly, his eyebrows raised. "Was that a proposal, Miss Lawson?" Rachel blushed. "I think you're supposed to do that part." Without hesitation, Kent lowered himself to one knee, wincing slightly as his healing wound protested the movement. Taking her hand in his, he looked up with such naked love in his eyes that Rachel felt tears begin to form in her own. "Rachel Lawson, I've loved you since the moment you scolded me for tracking mud into the mercantile 4 years ago. I've never stopped loving you, not for a single day, even when we were apart. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Rachel whispered, pulling him gently to his feet. Yes, I will. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve in Kingman's small church, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons for the holiday. The town turned out in forced curiosity about the couple's reconciliation, having given way to genuine happiness for two people who had overcome so much to find their way back to each other. Doc Miller stood as Kent's best man, beaming with the satisfaction of a physician who had not only saved a patient, but had inadvertently helped heal a relationship as well. Ellie Wilkins attended Rachel, having become a dear friend during the months of Rachel's stay at the ranch. As Rachel walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory, silk her one concession to San Francisco fashion, she felt none of the doubt that had plagued her before their first planned wedding. This time, she knew exactly who she was marrying, a man who had sacrificed his own happiness to keep her safe, a man who had never stopped loving her despite years of separation. Kent's face as he watched her approach was a study in wonderment, as though he couldn't quite believe this moment had arrived. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, squeezing them gently in silent affirmation. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying through the packed church. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When they exchanged vows, promises to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days, Rachel felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. This was where she belonged, not because it was easy or comfortable, but because it was true. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister concluded. "Mr. Matheson, you may kiss your bride." Kent's kiss was gentle yet full of promise, a pledge of all the days they would share. When they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, the cheers that erupted warmed Rachel's heart, erasing the last lingering memories of whispers and pitying glances from years past. The celebration continued at the town hall, transformed with evergreen garlands and candles for the occasion. There was music and dancing, a feast prepared by the women of Kingman, and enough goodwill to sustain the newlyweds through the cold winter months ahead. As midnight approached, Kent led Rachel outside to the quiet street. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the boardwalks and hitching posts with delicate white. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Matheson," he said softly, drawing her close. "Merry Christmas." Rachel smiled up at him, still marveling at the new name. "And happy new beginning." He kissed her then, snowflakes melting on their faces, the future stretching before them, not perfect, not without challenges, but theirs to face together. Spring came early to Kingman that year, bringing with it new growth and possibilities. Kent and Rachel had settled into married life with surprising ease, their shared history providing a foundation that new couples often lacked. The ranch prospered under their combined care, with Rachel bringing organizational skills from her city life that complemented Kent's practical knowledge of the land and animals. On a warm April evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, now a cherished daily ritual, Rachel turned to Kent with a smile that held a secret. "I received a letter today," she said casually. "From Sarah Willis, or Sarah Thornton as she's known now." Kent looked up with interest. "From Oregon. How did she find you?" "Apparently, the news of our wedding made it into a Denver newspaper. Her sister saw it and told her." Rachel unfolded the letter from her pocket. "She writes that she's been wanting to contact us for years, to thank you properly for saving her and her children. She has 4 now, the 2 from her first marriage, and twins with her new husband." Kent smiled, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "I'm glad to hear it. She deserved happiness after everything she went through. She also sent this." Rachel handed him a newspaper clipping. "It seems Jasper Reeves won't be troubling anyone anymore." Kent scanned the article, which reported the death of a notorious outlaw in a shootout with lawmen in Colorado. "So it's truly over," he said quietly. "All of it." "Yes." Rachel took his hand. "Which means it's time for new beginnings." Something in her tone made Kent look at her more closely. "Rachel, what is it?" She guided his hand to rest against her stomach, still flat but holding their future within. "We're going to have a baby." Kent's expression transformed from surprise to wonder to unbridled joy in the span of a heartbeat. "A baby? You're certain?" Rachel nodded, her own happiness reflected in her eyes. "Doc Miller confirmed it yesterday. He thinks sometime in November." November, Kent repeated, awe in his voice as he pulled her into a gentle embrace. A child of our own. The first of many, I hope, Rachel murmured against his shoulder. As many as you want, he promised, kissing her with tender passion. The months that followed were filled with preparations and planning. Kent expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for themselves and another for the baby. Rachel planted a vegetable garden and learned about caring for infants from Ellie Wilkins, who had 3 children of her own. By late summer, Rachel's condition was evident for all to see, her rounded belly a source of pride for Kent, who treated her with a protective tenderness that occasionally exasperated his independent wife. "I'm pregnant, not made of china," she reminded him one August afternoon as he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that weighed practically nothing. Kent grinned, unrepentant. "Humor me. I've waited a long time to fuss over you like this." As autumn approached, bringing with it cooler days and the golden hues of changing leaves, Rachel found herself reflecting often on the twisting path that had led her back to Kingman and to Kent. The pain and misunderstandings of the past seemed distant now, replaced by a deep contentment and anticipation for their future. "Do you ever wonder," she asked Kent one evening as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, "what might have happened if Doc Miller hadn't written to me when you were injured? If we had never found our way back to each other?" Kent was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her skin. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at you, at the life we're building, and I know it couldn't have been any other way. We were always meant to find each other again." Rachel covered his hand with her own, feeling the strong kick of their child beneath their joined fingers. "I believe that too." November arrived with unexpected warmth, as though summer was reluctant to release its hold on the Arizona territory. Rachel's time grew near, bringing with it the natural anxieties of a first-time mother, though she faced them with the quiet strength that had become her hallmark. Their daughter was born on a clear, star-filled night, arriving with surprising speed and a healthy pair of lungs that announced her presence to the world. Doc Miller, who had come to stay at the ranch for the final week of Rachel's confinement, declared the baby perfect in every way. "A beautiful girl," he pronounced, placing the swaddled infant in Kent's arms while he tended to an exhausted but radiant Rachel. Kent stood transfixed, staring down at the tiny face of his daughter, a perfect blend of himself and the woman he loved. "She's miraculous," he whispered, carefully bringing the baby to Rachel's side. Just like her mother, Rachel reached out to touch the downy head, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Hello, little one, we've been waiting for you." They named her Hope, a testament to the faith that had sustained them through separation and reunion. She was the physical embodiment of their love, a new beginning born of past trials overcome. As winter settled over the ranch, the Matheson household adjusted to life with an infant. Kent proved to be a devoted father, as willing to walk the floor with a fussing baby as he was to tackle the most demanding ranch work. Rachel discovered depths of love she hadn't known existed, her heart expanding to embrace this new role while still maintaining the partnership she and Kent had forged. On Christmas Eve, their first wedding anniversary, they bundled Hope in warm blankets and took her to church in Kingman for the holiday service. The same community that had witnessed their marriage now welcomed their child with open arms, the women cooing over the baby while the men congratulated Kent with hearty backslaps. After the service, as they drove home under a canopy of stars, Rachel nestled against Kent's side, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. "Happy?" Kent asked softly, his arm secure around her shoulders. Rachel looked up at him, at the face she had once thought lost to her forever, now as familiar and necessary as her own heartbeat. "Completely," she answered. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Kent pressed a kiss to her temple, then urged the horses homeward, toward the warm lights of the ranch house where they would celebrate not just a holiday, but the miraculous journey that had brought them together again. Years later, when Hope was 5 and her younger brothers, Thomas and James, were 3 and 1, Rachel would sometimes tell them the story of how their father had nearly died and how she had knelt beside his bed praying for his life. She would describe how he had opened his eyes and whispered, "You came back," the moment that had begun their family's true story. The children, of course, preferred the happier parts: the wedding at Christmas, the expansion of the ranch, the arrival of each new brother or sister. They didn't yet understand the value of the struggles that had preceded their existence, the ways in which adversity had forged their parents' love into something unbreakable. But Rachel and Kent understood. Each evening, as they sat together on their porch watching the sun set over the land that had become their legacy, they exchanged glances that held the knowledge of everything they had overcome. Not just the bullet that had nearly taken Kent's life, but the misunderstandings and separation that had preceded it. They had learned that love, true love, sometimes required facing the hardest truths, taking the greatest risks, and finding the courage to begin again. In doing so, they had created not just a family, but a testament to the enduring power of second chances. And in the vast, beautiful territory they called home, with children who carried their hopes and dreams into the future, Kent and Rachel Matheson had found something far greater than either had dared imagine during those dark days of separation. They had found their way home to each other, where they had always belonged.